Alright, I got all my anger out yesterday, so now I can talk about some positivity with my favorite movies of the year. In 2016, I saw way more movies than I usually do by the end of the year. In fact, I've seen more 2016 movies now than I have from the entirety of 2015. And while, yes, I saw a lot more mediocre movies, I also saw a lot more really good movies. In fact, having not seen movies like Allied, La La Land, Moonlight, Patriots Day, and that new Scorsese one, I actually had to boost up my honorable mentions to 12. And even then, I had to make some pretty painful cuts just because I didn't want this video to be ridiculously long. So all of these are also worth seeing. But as for the actual honorable mentions...
The Jungle Book, an intense, fun movie with phenomenal special effects. Kubo and the Two Strings, gorgeous to look at, likable characters, and a deep, very well-told story that was equal parts mature and lighthearted. The Nice Guys, Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling were great together. It has one of the best teenage characters I've seen in movies in a while, and the direction is tight and funny. Keanu, funny? Yes. Exciting? Yes. But also that fucking cat is one of the cutest things I've ever seen. That cat is the cat every other cat is going to look at and be like, I want to be like him. Suicide Squad. Yeah, screw the haters. I thought this movie was a ton of fun. The characters were entertaining, the acting was great, and I loved the style. And honestly, I thought the movie was written fine until the last act. The Purge election year. A suspenseful, intense thrill ride with great characters and a very, very timely story. Hush. An incredibly suspenseful home invasion film with one of the most hateable villains of the year. Kung Fu Panda 3. Funny, exciting, and more mature than you would expect from the title like that. So, pretty much the same as the other two. Finding Dory. Well, maybe not hitting the emotional heights of the first movie, it's still a funny, charming, and insanely likable film that left me smiling. X-Men Apocalypse. One of the most underrated movies of the year. I thought the action, performances, and story put this right up there with First Class and X2. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It may not be as good as most of the Harry Potters, but it's charming. I really like the characters, especially Jacob, and some scenes gave me that sense of wonderment that I don't get too often. And finally, Doctor Strange. Despite an incident that happened in the theater, this was still fun, I liked the lead, and it was insanely creative.
But let's get the actual list started. We're counting down!
My top 10 favorite movies of 2016. Number 10. I remember when I first saw the trailer for this movie and I thought this could be kind of okay or really stupid, but it was actually kind of great. Don't Breathe is just a great thriller. For those who don't know, it's about three people who try to rob a rich, blind war veteran, but it turns out he's a fucking badass and absolutely insane, and now they have to find a way out. With that premise, it could have easily failed since our heroes are robbers who try to rip off a blind veteran. However, they actually managed to make it work. One, they kill off the most annoying of the three pretty early on, and that's not a spoiler, it happens in the trailer, but also the writing and performances make the other two pretty likable. But as great as the two leads are, stealing the show is Stephen Lang, who is scary as shit. He's one of my favorite villains of the year because you do understand why he does the stuff he does, but he is also scary. He may be blind, but he can hear you, and you better pray he doesn't find you. And he manages to do some pretty fucked up shit. One of the scenes with him made me legit uncomfortable.
Let's just say it involves a turkey baster. You've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, you're probably cringing.
The direction is great. Most of the movie takes place in this one house, but he manages to keep the tension high through most of it. The lighting, the camera work, the music, it all works so well. It even manages to get some pretty unique camera angles in there. It kind of reminded me of Panic Room in the way it was shot. There is one cheap jump scare near the beginning, however, it is used to give some exposition, and it even foreshadows the ending, so even that kind of worked. My only problem was the very, very end, where it has sort of a twist. It didn't ruin it, but it did leave me with a bittersweet feeling. Whereas if they had left that out, I think this would have been like in the top 5. It seemed to be there only to set up a sequel, which this movie really doesn't need a sequel. However, if it's anywhere near as good as this, then I'm fine with it. If you haven't seen it yet, turn out the lights and give it a watch. It is one of the best thrillers of the year. Number 9.
This is one of those movies that got better as it went along because I will admit, the first act does have some problems.
The editing is really off, it keeps jumping around, the character development isn't that great, and the pacing feels slower than it should have. But this is why I think the ending is the most important part of the film, because while Don't Breathe I thought was stronger for most of the movie, it fumbled at the end. Rogue One gets better with each continuing act. The characters are fun. I will admit they don't get a ton of development, but they're at least interesting to watch. The story is pretty good, even though you know where it's going, not because of the story itself, but because we've seen A New Hope. Although I will admit, it did manage to surprise me with the end. I was not expecting it to go there. Once the group are all together, that's when the movie starts to get good. It begins to feel like a Star Wars Rebels episode a little bit, including the sarcastic asshole droid who is by far the best character. Speaking of characters, for those who haven't seen it, Darth Vader is only in 2 scenes, but those scenes are great. The action is great and the special effects are flawless. I know this may seem like an exaggeration, but these really are some of the best special effects I've ever seen. They blend in so well. I was actually having a hard time figuring out what was practical and what was CG. And yeah, I was fooled by that motion capture Tarkin, and apparently I'm the only one. I'm sure when I rewatch it I'll notice more flaws, but the fact that I didn't even think it was CG must mean something, whether it be the effects were really good or I was really getting into the story or something. But all that is small fry compared to the best thing in this movie, the final battle. This is one of the best climaxes of both Star Wars and this year. I was enthralled by this climax. Not to be cliche, but it blew me away. Even if the other acts were awful, which they weren't, I would still say this is worth seeing for the finale alone. Now, how does this stack up against Force Awakens? Well, I personally like Force Awakens more. Now yes, the climax blows Force Awakens out of the water, I mean, there's no contest. But I think Force Awakens was more consistent and had more interesting characters. But if you were one of those who was disappointed by Force Awakens, you may actually like this a lot better. I thought hard on if I should put this on the list if I only truly loved the last act, and that first act was really clumsy, but in the end I decided to put it on here because above all else, this got me hyped for the future of Star Wars. Bring on episode 8. And speaking of 8, Number 8.
This is the movie that made me say the Disney Renaissance we're in now is better than the one from the 90s.
Maui, shapeshifter, demigod of the wind and sea, I am one
Hero of men.
What?
It's actually Maui, shapeshifter, demigod of the wind and sea, hero of men.
Because really, even the weakest films in this Renaissance are better than the weak films of the 90s one. And while that decade still has Aladdin, my favorite Disney movie, I think overall the movies of this decade are better. With Wreck-It Ralph, Tangled, Frozen, the movie we'll get to later, and this. Moana was one of the most fun movies I saw this year. I loved it, the people in my theater loved it, everyone else seemed to love it. Admittedly, it does have a pretty standard story and follows the Disney formula quite a bit, but the characters make up for it. I loved Moana and Maui. The voice acting was great, they had convincing chemistry, and both got some good laughs. The animation is absolutely beautiful. I mean, most of the time we're just on a raft in the middle of the ocean, but it never gets boring to look at. The character designs are great, especially a lava monster that is absolutely haunting. The comedy is really funny. I love that the water was basically a character and had its own emotions, and the story, while definitely formulaic, is a really solid story that gripped me from the beginning. I will admit the last act had some contrived moments, but I was still along for the ride and I left the movie happy. But probably the element of the movie that steals the show are the songs. This is one of the most consistently good Disney musicals in years. Even in my favorites, I could think of one song where I'm like, that's alright. In here, every single song is great. I had to stop myself from dancing in the seat. I loved the music in this. The movie was directed by Ron Clements and John Musker, who did Aladdin, which again is my favorite Disney movie, but besides that, I can't think of any other movie they did I can say I really loved. I think Little Mermaid and Hercules are two of the weakest films of the Disney Renaissance, and while I enjoyed Great Mouse Detective, Treasure Planet, and Princess and the Frog fine, I never felt the need to watch them again. I will totally watch this again. As soon as it comes out, I'm buying it on Blu-ray. This movie was awesome.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.
Number 7.
If you had told me 5 years ago that I would like a Star Trek movie more than a Star Wars movie or a Harry Potter movie, I would have thought you were nuts.
No response. I am picking up some kind of signal. They're jamming us.
But yeah, having seen all of the Star Trek movies without seeing any of the shows, this is easily one of the best. In fact, I've thought about it, but personally, this may be my favorite. But again, I haven't seen any of the shows, and objectively there are probably better ones, so take that with a grain of salt. This was one of the best blockbusters of the summer. 2016 was weird in that the first third was better than most years, and the last third was amazing, but the summer was filled with a lot of disappointments, especially with the action movies. But Star Trek Beyond managed to fill that void. I like the fact that the story was smaller for this one compared to the last two. It's basically just the Enterprise crew getting stuck on a planet for most of it. In fact, a lot of the second act is just the crew walking around in separate groups, but it works because I like these characters. Spock and McCoy are both hilarious when working off each other. Scotty and the new character Jayla, or as I like to call her, Alien Ray, are a lot of fun, and Kirk and Chekhov are great. All the performances are solid, especially Anton Yelchin, and I don't just say that because he sadly passed away before the film's release. He was genuinely great. The villain Krull, played by Idris Elba in one of his best years ever, is also great. He's threatening, but you also get him. You get why he is doing what he's doing. The action is a ton of fun, even if there isn't a lot of it. The attack on the Enterprise is a highlight, and it uses Star Trek technology in a pretty creative way.
Also, the final space battle has one of the best uses of a song I've seen in a while.
But I think the main reason I like this so much is because it had heart. While I really like the other two Abrams movies, even Into Darkness, which seems to be getting a lot of shit these days, they didn't really have the heart. But the characters in this movie show that they really do care for each other, and the ending did get me right in the feels. It is one of the best endings of the year. It's a shame it didn't make that much money, because I want to see more of this crew. But if this is the last Star Trek movie we see with this cast, then it was a damn good one to go out on. Number 6.
Louise. I am Louise.
What is that? Is that a new symbol? I can't tell.
So earlier this year I watched Contact for my Zemeckathlon, and not long after it was posted, this movie came out. This is a better movie. In fact, I would put it up there in the category of great, smart, slow-burning sci-fi films like Close Encounters and Interstellar. I love this movie, but I can't really say much about it for fear of spoiling something. This is a film you need to experience knowing as little as possible. All you need to know is that there are aliens that have landed and now we have to figure out what they want. The acting is really good. Amy Adams gives one of the best performances I've seen from her, and Jeremy Renner is very charming and gives some nice comic relief. I mean, just ask the guy in the row ahead of me. Although they really are the only two characters I cared about, the others just sort of stick in the background, which is probably the movie's biggest flaw. The special effects are fantastic, and it's a great story. And I really have to say, this movie came out with perfect timing with its message of working together globally even when it isn't pleasant, and not just bombing something immediately because you think it may be a threat. Probably my favorite aspect of this movie was the direction and how slowly it takes its time. It's not like I'm saying the movie is a slog like, say, 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it is more slow-paced and creates such a rich, haunting atmosphere. There is a 10-minute long scene when they first get into the alien ship where my mouth was hanging open the whole time. It ranks right up there with the ending of Close Encounters. This is an example of how to use slow build-up right. Normally, I'm more for fast-paced, but compare this to something like Passengers, which I did like overall, but it moved at such a quick speed that it never built up a great atmosphere. This did. Arrival isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you can get into the more atmosphere-driven pace, then you won't regret it.
I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. Help me.
Number 5.
Best in-name-only sequel of all time.
Off limits unless I give express permission. Go ahead.
But I don't need to.
You will, though. And I've got to pace these things out, so please.
I absolutely love Cloverfield. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and ever since I first saw it, I've been waiting to see a sequel. I think there are a lot of possibilities you can do with this idea, whether it be a direct sequel, a prequel, or another angle from that night, but after 8 years, I had pretty much given up all hope. Then in January, I heard of a trailer for a movie called 10 Cloverfield Lane that said it would be premiering in just 2 months later. And while I was impressed that they managed to keep the making of it a secret, I was a little disappointed that it seemed so different. First of all, non-found footage sequels to found footage movies always turn out bad. And 2, it just didn't seem to have much to do with the first movie, and in fact the original script wasn't even called 10 Cloverfield Lane. But it still looked interesting, and I liked the cast, so I watched it, and it was fantastic. This is probably the most suspenseful movie of the year. I love the main character, played wonderfully by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and you feel just as trapped as she does. She has no idea what to do. Does she stay in this bunker with this man who is clearly unstable, or attempt to escape and face whatever dangers lie outside? The direction is fantastic. This bunker feels like a prison, and it has this claustrophobic feel throughout it. John Gallagher Jr. does a good job as Emmett and provides some nice but not distracting comic relief, but the best performance is John Goodman, who is absolutely terrifying. This is one of the scariest performances of not just the year, but of like the past 10 years.
In fact, Academy Awards. I will forgive you for every snub, for every stupid decision you will ultimately make if you at least give Goodman a nomination for Best Supporting Actor.
I know a lot of people didn't like the ending, but personally, I loved it. I mean, yeah, it is a huge tonal shift and doesn't really build up to it, but it led to a great climax. Now, as for how this connects to Cloverfield, I have an idea, but I won't discuss it here because it would involve spoilers for both movies, but I'll leave a link for a journal I did on DeviantArt. And with the next movie, The God Particle, coming out in October, I look forward to seeing how this all connects. And if they go the way I think they're going with it, then this could be one of the most ingenious franchises of all time.
The more I want to, something inside me's changed. I was so much younger yesterday.
Number 4.
The most feared crime boss in Tundra Town. They call him Mr. Big, and he does not like me, so we gotta go.
I'm not leaving. This is a crime scene.
Well, it's gonna be an even bigger crime scene if Mr. Big finds me here, so we're leaving right now. Oh, God.
So by now, even if you haven't seen Zootopia, I think you know what it's about and how it has themes of prejudice, which is extremely timely and in fact probably will be timely for the next few years, and it does it very well and doesn't really come off as that preachy. I'm glad it made a lot of money, and I'm really glad kids will grow up with this. Hopefully they can fix the shit we weren't able to. But while that's all well and good, I do think it kind of overshadows the fact that the film's just fun. In fact, this is the film from 2016 that I've watched the most because it's just insanely rewatchable. It's one of the best comedies of the year. Most of the jokes land, and even the few that don't are excusable because the movie is so entertaining. It moves at a great pace, the tone switches from light and silly to dark and dreary very smoothly, and the action scenes are a ton of fun. The music is fantastic. The score is from Michael Giacchino, who also this year gave us scores for Rogue One, Star Trek Beyond, and Doctor Strange.
And I swear that Shakira song will not leave my head.
Even taking out the subtext, the story is still solid. It's a good mystery where I wasn't able to predict it, it's a fun adventure around the city, and I love the characters. Most of the side characters are funny and charming, even if they only get a few minutes of screen time, and Nick and Judy work great together. I want to see more of these two. The voice acting is solid, and the animation is absolutely beautiful. Some of the best CG animation I've ever seen. Like I said, it isn't subtle at all, and some of the dialogue is a bit forced, but those don't stop Zootopia from being my favorite animated movie of the year. Number 3.
I think we can all agree that this was a much better year for movies than 2013 was. If you saw my favorite movies of that year, you'll know that my absolute favorite was The Conjuring. Well, I like this movie more than The Conjuring, and it's only a number 3.
My house! This was a pretty damn good year for horrors and thrillers, with Don't Breathe, Lights Out, and The Shallows being some of the better movies from the summer. But the best is The Conjuring 2, which has two huge things going for it. One, it is legitimately horrifying. I know there are going to be some people out there who are like, that wasn't scary, it was stupid. And to them I say, I have to respectfully disagree. This is probably my favorite horror film since Paranormal Activity 2, way back in 2010. It doesn't rely on cheap jump scares, it takes its time to build up suspense, and uses sound effects and music to pull off the scares brilliantly. Yeah, I will say it did get ridiculously over the top during the climax, and that can be a bit silly at times, but the reason it works is because it slowly built up to that climax. So much so that I was on the edge of my seat. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but no, really, I was on the edge of my seat. And the second thing it does is that it has a real, believable heart to it. I love the Warrens and thought they had great chemistry, and the family was not only smart when they realize something is up, they leave the fucking house, but I genuinely cared about them. And there are parts of this movie that are actually pretty sweet. Like when Patrick is playing the guitar, I actually felt for them in that scene. I wanted them all to be safe. This reminded me of Poltergeist, probably my favorite horror movie. It actually has a lot of the same pros. A steady build-up leading to an excellent over-the-top climax, great directing and acting, I mean some of the best I saw all year, and heart. With characters I would watch even if the scary stuff wasn't happening around them. Is there anything I didn't like? Well, I guess a few of the scares were a bit predictable, and it did sometimes blare the music and sound effects a little too loud, but all of that doesn't stop The Conjuring 2 from being one of the best horror movies I've ever seen.
Used to dream of outer space, but now they're laughing at the face, saying, wake up, you need to make money. Yeah.
Number 2.
Oh, hello. I know, right? Whose balls did I have to fondle to get my very own movie? I can't tell you, but it does rhyme with Pulverine.
Deadpool is the funniest movie of the year. Most of the jokes made me laugh and made me laugh hard. It's also the best movie in the X-Men universe. Yep, I even like this more than Days of Future Past. I mean, I liked X-Men Apocalypse. I liked it a lot. But it was really nice to get a simple, fun comic book movie again. No story arcs, not really setting up any future movies until the very end. Just fun. The characters are all great. Deadpool is everything I loved about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, but R-rated. And Negasonic Teenage Warhead is just a fucking badass. The acting is great all around. I haven't seen many Ryan Reynolds movies, but he was fantastic in this. And it's always nice to see TJ Miller. Even when he's in a bad movie, he's usually the best part. The story is good, even if it does get a little bit conventional at points, especially the ending, but it's extremely entertaining, and there are some parts where it can get really dark. The action is great, the special effects are top notch, and it has a great soundtrack, but one thing that really surprised me was that it actually did have a little bit of a heart to it, in its own demented way. The direction is tight, the jokes and editing are so quick that it never gets boring or predictable. I don't think there was a single joke that didn't at least get a chuckle out of me. Now yes, it's crude as fuck, and sometimes can get incredibly juvenile, but the acting and directing make it work. Deadpool just kicks fucking ass.
Yeah, we can work them all. Oh, yeah.
number 1.
I know it seems kind of cheap to put this movie at number 1. I don't care.
Oh god, I love this movie. This actually surpassed my expectations. I mean, I was looking forward to it. I really like the other 2 Captain America movies, but I wasn't sweating in anticipation. But it not only was a great action movie, but a smart movie.
To an extent. Okay? I know some of you nitpickers are gonna leave your comments. Calm down.
At the very least, it was smarter than I thought it was going to be. The main marketing campaign for the movie was Team Cap or Team Stark, but when I was watching the movie, I couldn't decide. Both sides make a compelling argument. On one hand, yeah, their fighting has led to casualties, while on the other, do you trust the government to have full control over these guys? They still have saved millions of people on their own. It's a compelling rivalry, and after months of thinking about it, I still don't know. But it doesn't skip out on the action either. The set pieces in this movie are absolutely fantastic and got rid of any doubts about the Russo brothers directing Infinity War. Granted, the first action scene did have a little too much shaky cam, and really, that's the only complaint I have. While I really like the other 2 Captain America movies, they didn't blow me away with the action. Typically, when I think of MCU and action, I think Iron Man 3 or the Avengers movies. In fact, why didn't they just call this Avengers 3? I mean, yeah, Thor and Hulk aren't in it, but they have Ant-Man, Black Panther, and Spider-Man. I think that makes up for it. Speaking of Spider-Man, there's been a debate over who is the best film version of Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield. Well, we don't have to debate that anymore because Tom Holland is so perfect as Spider-Man. You know, as much as I wanted to see a sequel to Amazing Spider-Man 2, I have no problem seeing more movies with this guy. The 12-way battle in the middle of the film was amazing. I laughed, I was in constant suspense, the acting is great, the special effects are phenomenal, and I liked pretty much every character. I guess it didn't really need a villain, but I still found him threatening. Is it my favorite movie of the MCU? Well, not quite. I still enjoy the first Avengers more, but I think this is objectively the best. It seems to be getting a small but vocal backlash, but I don't care. I loved this movie.
So yeah, 2016's almost over, and you know, despite all the bad shit, I am kind of glad I got to experience this fucking crazy year. I know a lot of people are scared right now, and believe me, I get it, but I think we'll be fine. I'm not gonna pretend it's gonna be easy. It's not always gonna be pleasant, but I think we'll be fine. America's been around for 240 years. We've survived 2 world wars, a civil war, and a Great Depression. I think we'll survive the next 4. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great new year. And see y'all next time. Bye.
Colossus was really funny, and Negasonic Teenage Wasteland is just a fucking... Well, that's a predicament I'm really sad happened.